Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of the White Lotus Season 3 finale. With this finale, I have a lot of thoughts. It's a big episode, it was an hour and a half, so it felt like you're watching a mini movie here. And what I really liked about the finale was the connection that we had here between Timothy and Rick and the opposing choices they make, and how it really sums up how their stories will end, where one's a full tragedy and the other is actually more of a happy note. So I have thought the whole season, and it continues in the finale, the best story has been with the Ratliffs, and I think it's been the most consistent, and I thought it had the best conclusion of the season. I think it's one of the better storylines we've had in White Lotus ever. And it's really interesting seeing how they wrap this up, because they did such a good job of having the tension here with the poison colada, which was wild. And then they're starting to sip it. I'm like, oh my God, they're all just going to die here. And Timothy has a moment where he actually makes the right choice and doesn't let his ego get in the way and actually stops it from happening. Now, he's an idiot because then he left the blunder out where Lachlan was almost killed. And I think by Lachlan staying alive, that there's some karmic justice for Timothy there, that him making the right choice and doing what was right saved his family. And it gave reward to that. And he's a character like Rick, who's been suffering the whole season and just in their own world, in their own head. And Rick is the other side of this, where he reverted, where he was made the right choice last episode to not be violent. And then this episode, he completely relapses in that way and selfishly does it. He did this when he was getting Frank involved and not caring about Frank, relapsing. And then he always has not been there attentive enough for Chloe, who's always had his back. And then when push comes to shove, you think he's better now and Chloe's all excited, but his real dad shows up. And by the way, I'll get into that reveal in a second, but I have some issues with that. But I was just really shocked that he actually went through with the killing, and it set up the tragedy, because by him doing that and choosing violence, like what the monk's been talking about, how violence only leads to more suffering, you see that Chloe ends up paying the price for it and dying too. So he got Chloe inadvertently killed as well, causing this whole scene. And it shows that bad side of Rick he can never break, and him wanting this revenge. Now, I was loving that reveal of him killing, but right when they said that it was his actual father, I rolled my eyes so hard, because it's so cliche. And for being that last moment, the Darth Vader reveal, come on, like that was just silly to me. I thought it was fine not even having him as his father. I think it hit just as hard about him yelling at him and saying that his mom was no saint, his father was no saint, and calling his mom a slut was enough to justify what he was about to do. And it made you better to be wondering about his father, I think would have been cooler than just confirm that that guy is his dad. That was silly to me. I think that really brought the score down for me in my head a little bit, because it was going so well, I thought, the finale. And that one reveal, I was just like, oh, no way, you know. But either way, I still think it was effective what they did with Rick and Chelsea here and how it ended. And Chelsea talking about fate and like accepting it, and you know, we're gonna go out together. So at that moment, she was saying they're gonna go out together, whatever it happens, like you knew it was coming, but it was still really good. Now, everything going on with that Ratliff family too, you look at how all the characters ended with Piper. Like I said last episode, really wasn't enjoying the monasteries as she thought she would, and that part of her upbringing, her privilege, came into play here, and her not liking the food, not liking the bed. But you see, it was a nice moment with Piper, because she's revealing her true self and taking the mask off for a minute, and that, yeah, she does care and feels bad for the other side of the world and doesn't have the privilege she has. But she's also being real about it. Like, I'm not going to do it myself. I'm not built for this. And what's awesome is that Saxon leaves this vacation now a spiritual man, getting more into what Piper was trying to find in herself, but she didn't. But he did. And I thought that's really cool. That was a big surprise for Saxon. I thought Saxon's story worked really well. And I like they had a moment there where in another world, maybe he was better for Chloe than Rick ever was. And they kind of leave that there when he looks at her and he's upset that she goes back to him. And I think that might have been a better match for her, honestly. Because, yeah, Rick's got issues. I honestly think in that same scene with Gaitok, and how I predicted Gaitok would shoot somebody, and it would be something where he's doing it in defense. I mean, he made the right call there. I mean, this Rick is the most violent one there at that moment, and he got Chloe killed, and he kind of deserved it at that point. Like, this guy is not a good guy, and he blames his past for it. And you look at the real tragedy of it all is that line Chloe says to Rick, where she's like, basically saying, like, you got to get over the love you didn't have and enjoy the love you have. That's basically the story that he could never do for himself. He couldn't let go of his identity. He's attached himself about his past, and it got himself killed, and it got the real true love he should have been embracing killed, his selfishness. And that's what I'm talking about with the difference of Timothy, where he was like that the whole season and then broke out of it, and it saved his family in the end, and it saved Jaclyn. So I really liked that he at least got a happy ending. It wasn't all just tragedy. But before I even shift gears, I do want to say, I do think Victoria's story kind of faded out. So that was a little disappointing because she was really interesting in the beginning of the show, and then she kind of just became a comic story, but nothing really happening there. So I think it was a little bit of a letdown. And then Jaclyn, I liked his story. I liked that he had that talk with Saxon and that he's explaining his point of view from it. Even though it's still a messed up thing he did, it makes sense for the character of Jaclyn and what we knew about him being this people pleaser and how he's such a confused kid, and he's saying he just wanted to make his brother feel good because he was out of the action. So it's that psychology of how, like, Jaclyn just is a kid who I think means well. Some people are calling him a predator. I just don't see that. I just think he's very confused, and he has good intention, but it's the wrong thing he's doing with that good intention. It ends up being something messed up. So I think it ended interesting for him in that he was ready to live in Thailand and live a life without wanting anything different from his whole family. So I think that was cool that when he almost died, he saw the monks there. So very interesting that he was like in that kind of mind at the end of his life. And that also, I think deep down probably gave his father some hope to him, saying that he's the only one in the family who said he could live without anything. So it really was cool. And I predicted this whole season that Timothy would end up in the monastery. He didn't, but I do think he ended up in some kind of enlightened mindset and being ready to live a life with all these things he thought he needed. I thought that was really beautiful and really well done. So really like how Timothy's story ended, and I really like how they basically ended most of the Ratliff stories. Let's go to everything now with Belinda and Greg. And I knew it was going to be that Greg was going to be a red herring, that it wasn't going to be him involved with the killings. I called that, and that was going to be the bodyguard and that story. And I think that it's really awesome that Zion was like secretly the MVP of this episode, and that he's such a good negotiator, and that, Belinda at the end of the day, I think did the right thing, and he should do in that situation, because if she didn't take the money, he was going to kill her no matter what. So that her taking the money, she gets something out of it at least, and wouldn't you want to still be alive? And you got to live with that guilt and know you're accomplice to that in a way, but would you rather just die than with the truth, right? So I think she made the right call, and I think it's totally justified. And it's sad, though, in that now her being rich and being on that side where Tanya is like she's kind of letting go of Porn Chai now. Porn Chai is where Belinda was, I thought that was really interesting to kind of look at, and that he's going to not be able to go with her, too, is kind of sad. So I felt bad for Porn Chai, but I think Belinda deserves this more than anybody, and I thought Zion was a really good character in this episode, and it was a happy ending for Belinda for sure. I also think it made sense where Gaitok ended up, and that you're rooting for him at the end, and that it's kind of funny that Mook always just wanted him to man up, basically, and she liked everything else about him except that, and he manned up, and he got the girl, and that was the point of the story too. It wasn't just like, oh, violence is always going to lead to suffering and more violence. That's not the message here. That's in some cases is usually not the right choice, but there's some places it's necessary, and that was what she was telling Gaitok, and that is totally true. And I think he chose the right place to be actually taking action instead of where he could have with the Russians and tattling on them. Because remember, the way Valentine talks about it, like, yeah, you feel for them, because like he's saying, his coworkers, they can't work anymore. They're all going to be killed. They're going to be deported. So I think he definitely made the right call there, and it's honorable of Gaitok. So I thought that was a nice touch how they ended the Russian storyline too. Now, with the three best friends, I think people are going to be mad about how they ended that, but I actually loved it because I have had similar friendship groups like that, and I love they showed a realistic ending because they made it seem like they were going to have Laurie there at the end, be like, you guys are all phony and fake still, and, we all do this behind our backs and stuff. But she actually was saying, like, I've been through this. I've been sad at points. We had our drama, but at the end of the day, she's like, I'm happy my time with you guys. And at the end of the day, we still have fun together. And like, I know what she's talking about, where like friendships aren't perfect, but there's something beautiful about them and that they're messy and that, we talk about each other behind our back sometimes. We do different things, we mess up, but you still love each other. And it's so important how she values time at the end of the day, how important that is to her life and loves them still for what they are. So I thought that was excellent. I thought Carrie Coon gave just the performance of the night, and definitely probably, oh man, I think she is my Emmy pick for the season and performance. I think she was spectacular. So I thought that was my favorite monologue too. It's just really good. Now Fabian kind of seems like a throwaway character, which is fine. I wasn't interested in him from the beginning, so he was kind of there, and I don't know where his story was kind of going. He was kind of helping move the plot along, but overall, I would also think that for the season, I still think it could have been way better paced to where we got, but I think the finale was the best episode of the season. So I'm actually going to give the finale a 9. And I think because thematically this season has been strong, it's tough because it's not as funny as the other seasons. It's not as brilliant as season 2, where I think season 2 had everything cooking and is the best season. But I think this one edges season 1 just a little bit now for me. I think the finale actually brought it up a bit. I like this finale a little better than season 1's finale. I think the themes were a little stronger in this season than season 1, but still nowhere near season 2 for me. But it's close with season 1. But I think the finale really made me like this season a lot more. But I think the biggest problem of this season was the humor wasn't really there, as we know the show is known for, and having a personality character like a Tanya or a Murray, and that it just had some pacing problems. I think it could have cut a whole episode, to be honest. So I still think this was a really good finale. I'm impressed. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this finale, what you think of the episode, what you think of the season as a whole, and I want to hear your rankings as well for the White Lotus seasons. I've appreciated you guys. This is the first time you're with me. Please subscribe. It helps in so many ways. I do celebrity interviews as well. You can enjoy the shows I cover, I promise. And if you have been with me, I appreciate you, and keep coming back. You guys are the best, and I'll see you next time.